Good morning. This is something, okay, if you play a tank in a MOBA, you need to watch this video. Why? Well, I've played tanks professionally in MOBAs, and this is something that I have never heard talked about ever, which is, I'm going to call it the Frontline paradox. So the Frontline paradox is where DPS seem to be out of position. And if this is a paradox for you, then you need to watch this video. Okay, so the paradox is when the team's playing aggressive, the DPS is in the back line. And when the team's playing defensive, the DPS is at the front line taking damage. Now, why is this a paradox? Because being in the front line taking damage is less safe than being in the back line taking damage. And I'm going to refute that and tell you why the tank, when you're playing defensive, should not be in the front line. Assumptions. Number one, the other team has area of effect, lockdown, or damage. And number two, that the tank has crowd control and an escape, okay? And number three, that the tank does not have knockback. Like you the tank. You are the tank, okay? You do not have knockback, but you do have lockdown. Now, in a professional match, what is the tank's role when playing aggressively? To lock down a target to secure a kill. In a professional match, what is the tank's role when playing hyper aggressively? You're using all your CC to lock down a target, secure a kill. So that's where you need your HP to go, is into locking down a target. That's where you need your presence, and you need HP to have presence. So you're going to be putting your presence in the enemy back line. That's why you're in the front. Now, when you're playing defensively, where do you need your presence? Your tank's job is to peel. The peel means to like damage or CC the DPS to deny a killing blow to your allies, or to deny locking down on your allies. Because if you're a healer, peeling could be cleanses and heals and shields, but and force walls or knockbacks. But that's why. So a tank with a knockback could still be frontline if he wants to peel. But if you have no knockback, you kind of want to be equidistant from your squishies so that you can react to flanks and be not caught in crowd control, that is area of effect, when they target your DPS. So you don't want to be in area of effect. So you're essentially being positioned to react. You in Heroes of the Storm. This is in Heroes of the Storm, okay? Probably not so much in any other MOBA, but definitely in Heroes of the Storm. The tank wants to stay mounted because he has that, 40% speed buff, so he needs to stay mounted and not take damage so he can react to where the enemy is coming from. Otherwise, enemy has the speed advantage. Okay, so that's very important. When the tank is playing defensively to protect his allies, he needs to stay mounted, and that means he's not in the front line taking free poke. Now, when there was something I wanted to add for like some exception, but now I forget. Anyways, the DPS, when he's playing super defensive, what's he using his escape mechanic for? Let's assume the DPS has at least one escape mechanic. He's using his escape mechanic to survive. Now, and the tank, the tank sometimes uses his escape mechanic to intercept an enemy and save the DPS, sometimes. So, that was the exception. But also, it would be, if the other team's really fed, then the tank just needs to save his HP, because in order to commit to peeling for an ally, you actually need to go there, dismount, start laying down the CC, and then, yeah, you can't use your CC at the start of the fight to avoid poke. You'll need it to disengage at the end of the fight after you've been locked down, or preferably before you've been comboed. Or during the combo to break out of the combo. You know, that was the exception to the rule. Now, the DPS in a defensive fight is out there poking, And so the DPS, the ranged DPS with the escape mechanic, is delivering his poke, his damage in the front line. That's the paradox. The ranged DPS is in the front line. He's a squishy. He's taking damage, but that's where your healers are going onto your DPS, and so you're trading damage you're trading mana and cooldowns between the healers, because that's the heals are going to the DPS, and the DPS safely poking and uses the escape when it's about to become unsafe, right? That's when the tank has to secure the disengage, okay? The tank's role in a defensive fight is to secure the disengage and to peel if the enemy team dives. In an aggressive fight, the tank's role is to aggressively lock down. That's why he's at the front. That's why he's locking down. But it's the DPS who secures the kills via damage. It's the DPS who follows up on the lockdown and dives using its escapes. The DPS uses their escapes to dive, and that's why they start at the back line as a follow-up on whoever the tank is targeting, because that's how you secure a kill, by following up on the tank. And with triangle formation between DPS support or DPS, there's different roles you can have, but I eventually you want that triangle where if the enemy is there, then in the front you have the tank, on the one side you have a DPS, and on the other side you have another squishy, and then the other bruiser or off healer or off DPS can choose anywhere else depending on how tanky they are, whether they want to get CC'd, whether they want to be closer to the flank that the target you're diving is on, or closer to the DPS so that they can follow up on them, right? Depending on how your team comp is and how the other team comp is. But you don't all want to be clumped, right? Because like when you're chasing down a target, right? If you are all like just tank in front and everybody clumped behind, then if you chase the target, you all clump up closer, because you're all converging on a target when you shuffle step or orb walk or just approach that. When you chase the target down, if they move back, you're converging. So that's why the initial triangle formation gives you more time to chase as you're doing damage, because you don't converge as quickly onto a singular point that can be punished by AoE. AoE means area of effect, obviously, not Age of Empires. And so I'm still kind of salty that Definitive Edition is only for Windows 10, so for Age of Empires. The that's everything I had to say. Yeah, if you're playing hyper aggressive, then the DPS is safe in the backline because they need to conserve their HP for when they dive. The healer, in fact, that also allows the healer to conserve their defensives. The heal, the burst heal, the burst shield, conserve their defensive for the DPS, because the tank is taking damage, right? The tank is taking damage, but once he has his lockdown down, he's also a damage soak, right? He's soaking cooldowns from the enemy, because the enemy has to peel. The enemy has to use their cooldowns to peel for your tank. So once your tank has used their cooldowns in the front line, they're using their escape not to secure the kill, but to disengage once they've soaked cooldowns, right? If the other team does not peel, does not deal with this tank, does not focus that tank, then the tank can use their escape to chase and secure a kill. But usually the enemy team will peel for their squishies, obviously, and so that tank needs their escape to escape, and then your healer can heal. It depends if you have heals over time. Heals over time, you would heal the front line. If you have burst heals, it really depends on the team comps. But sometimes your tank can be frontline and then back out if he's not getting heals. And but if yeah, because the tank's presence is negligible once he's used his cooldowns, right? That's the strength of a tank, is all of his cooldowns that he can use whenever he pleases. But if he uses all his cooldowns at a target, then he can just use his escape and wait for the cooldowns to come up and mount up again for that speed boost to re-engage. And that's why he doesn't need the heal as much when you're playing hyper aggressive. And so you can use the heals on the follow-up squishies who are diving in with their escape mechanics to secure the kill. And that's why you need the heals and the shields and I mean, particularly the burst heals to peel for or to protect the squishies as they dive with their escapes, because they have no disengage. The tank's not there to disengage for them. Their disengage is killing the enemy before they die, and that's why you're using the burst heals on the follow-up dive. And that's why on when I'm playing hyper aggressive as Sylvanas or Vala, or who else would it be? I don't know. I wasn't this good at League of Legends when I played League of Legends, but Ezreal, Caitlyn. When I'm playing defensive, I'm following my tank. When I'm playing sorry. When I'm playing aggressive, I'm following my tank and being the follow up, and I can use my escapes to secure a kill. But when I'm playing aggressive, my tank needs to stay mounted for the speed buff, at least in Heroes of the Storm, and I am the one poking and delivering damage, trading damage, winning those damage trades, and using my escape to disengage. Now, obviously, depending on what the other team does, you can switch between an aggressive and a defensive mindset. But those are the two mindsets that your DPS should have. So when you're a tank and the other team is fed and your DPS is in front of you, that's why. Because they expect you to secure their disengage with your peel if the enemy dives your squishy. That's your role as a tank.